I can't help but think about Elon Musk for
Yeah.
in this conversation because I'm studying him right now. I'm studying his mind and his philosophy, and he's really big on inspiring the future, and he wants to have that sense of adventure. And I get the feeling that all of his companies and all of his missions are about inspiring, and like he wants to have a reason to get up in the morning. He wants to go to Mars. He wants to create the movie Dune in real life, and he's even bought a social media platform. And I'm wondering, like, perhaps, if he's open sourcing the algorithm, perhaps like they can create a social media platform where doomerism is not the primary drug. Intentionally controversial. I see it all the time on Twitter.
Yeah, but it rises those ideas, it rises those individuals, it rises those mindsets, raises, I don't know the word here. And so I don't know if it can ever be that type of a platform unless the structure of it changes. Now you can contrast that with something like Reddit, where it's like the most basic ideas, like basic as opposed to the opposite of based ideas, are going to be the ones that rise. Because if it's a voting system, then it's whatever appeals to the mean is going to be the thing that rises the most, which is going to sort for a very specific type of post.
But I just want to loop back to Elon. He's like a pretty hardcore pro-natalist, one of the few. Honestly, you and Elon are like the only people I can even think of. And he has like something like 10 kids. And one thing he said, I think it was on Twitter, was you will absolutely be happier if you have kids. Absolutely. We've evolved for that, as all creatures have. And I'm wondering, what's the probability that mainstream medicine prescribes parenthood as therapy?
None, because it won't prescribe anything. So, I mean, medicine, to an extent that I think people don't really understand, and we've talked about this, was in our psychology is becoming a cult video. Psychology has begun to adopt a lot of practices, and I used to be a psychologist, that were actually, and I used to also really study cults, that were actually pioneered by Scientology, and that they're being used to create dependency. The medical field is rewarded where it can create dependency. Anything that actually cures you or makes you better is stuff that they are not rewarded for doing. And that's why I think that your listeners are smart to coming to people like you guys for like meditation and like spiritual or whatever, like improvement, rather than going to individuals like psychologists who have this, like I'm very negative on the modern field of psychologists. And I don't think that all psychologists are this way, just the most successful ones. And that's the problem. The ones who actually fix people, they are punished. They are punished financially, and they are punished in terms of distribution of their services, right? So it's a really negative thing. So yeah, he's right in what he's saying. And in terms of Elon more broadly, he is really smart. He, I think, clearly sees what's going on, and he just has too many things pulling on him at the moment to fix everything we need him to fix.
Yeah, well, that's where you guys come in, right?
Right? More disciples, I guess.
Awesome. And so you agree, having kids will absolutely make you happier?
No,
Not
well, I mean, I
necessarily.
would say like there are many people, like I definitely would not prescribe having kids, because it is not, there are many people who think like having kids will solve their problems, or they have kids for the wrong reasons, and that really, that's a human life, like
Don't spam kids.
Yeah, well, or like, well, don't bring a kid into the world if you are doing it, like if you're mentally unstable and not really ready
Simone,
to be there
I think
for
a
the
better
kid.
way to put it is don't have a kid to feel good. If the reason you're having a kid is to feel happier, you almost certainly won't feel happier. If the reason you're having a kid is to make them feel happy and to give them a good life, yeah, you're probably going to feel good having a kid.
Yeah, and you see this actually with the way that different people react to like unexpected kids, right? There are some people who like their lives are really big messes, but depending on how they contextualize having a kid, they like pull their act together, they get their life together, and they actually do a whole lot better after the kid is there, because like Malcolm says, they're like, I need to like, oh, this is serious now. Like my life is no longer about me. I have to make sure this human is okay. There are other people who have the wrong contextualization, or a much more dangerous and harmful contextualization and reaction, where it's more like, oh, this is so horrible for me. What about me? Oh my gosh, this is horrible for me.
Or probably worse for both, if the kid is it's changing their narrative, and the kid is important to them because now it makes them a mom, which changes their status in society or within whatever social group they're in. And now they're and you'll see them like campaigning for their kids like smallest of disabilities because they're this big protector now. But the other thing to note, whenever we're talking about anything that like we biologically evolved to do, I can tell people you will probably get a huge amount of emotional like well-being and benefit from your kids and have an emotional transformation. But I can't promise that to anyone. Like I can't promise my boys before they go through puberty that they're going to end up being aroused by women. They might, small probability, end up being aroused by men. Sometimes biology just does weird things. And I think it's the same thing with kids. You can't 100% promise how your biology is going to react to it. But I think if that's what's motivating you to have kids, it's probably the wrong reason to have kids to begin with. And I think that this is another reason why Israel's doing so well and why Judaism is doing so well more broadly, is a lot of other cultures, historically, the way that they motivated intergenerational fidelity within a cultural unit that is like kept the culture going between generations was to tell people, if you leave this culture, you will be punished. You will, like as you were talking about with the Amish, you'll lose your social security, you'll lose your health care, you'll lose your support network. All of your friends will shun you. All of your family will shun you. And then in addition to that, you'll be punished for all eternity in some sort of other realm, right? Like that mechanism for keeping people within your culture is actually completely falling apart because the internet makes it very easy to debunk most of the theological claims within a lot of religious systems. Put doubt on. Like it's harder to, it's much easier for people to find apologetics from other perspectives, which really lowers the hell threat. And then in terms of you won't find anyone to accept you, well, that's pretty much gone now that people have the internet. And then, you won't find anyone to support you. Well, we live increasingly in nanny state, so that's gone. That's actually why we argue that progressives are so pro nanny state, like so pro like government services. It's because their groups have such low fertility rates. If the only way they can survive is by deconverting people from sort of harder cultural groups, well, by increasing the amount of government services, they make it much easier to do that because their sort of new cultural groups don't actually make the sacrifices needed to pay for cultural services for other members of these groups. But then the differential value of, having these local soup kitchens and stuff like that really decreases, right? So anyway, the point I was making was why Israel. Yeah, so Judaism doesn't do that as much as other religions. And the sects of Judaism that do that are actually suffering right now. Whereas the ones that don't, the ones that are like, oh yeah, you Judaism is less of a sign of what's true about the underlying fabric of reality and more a system of rules of how we interact and that have worked for thousands of years. And if you strictly follow them, you'll have a good life. And look at the people who aren't following them. Look at how shit their lives are. And I think for a lot of religions, that's becoming an easier and easier pitch to make.
Simone, anything to add?
No, I mean, Malcolm and I talk about this a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, these are her ideas as much as mine. This
gotcha.
Is just like...
So it sounds like maybe you're actually not so bullish on the Amish because really you can't keep smartphones out of their pockets.
Well, I'm not bullish on the Amish. I'm bullish on them growing. I'm not bullish on them mattering. And I think
so there's a difference, but there are lots, in other words, of people who are going to inherit the future, like population wise, they're going to show up, and we see that the Amish are going to show up. Okay. Are they going to shape the future of humanity, of technological development, of governance, of, all, the sort of ways that humanity is going to evolve and change over time? No, probably not, because they're choosing to opt out of mainstream society and influencing mainstream society.
And this is something that I think a lot of people miss. They're afraid, like they'll look at cultural groups that have high fertility rates and they get scared by these cultural groups. And all I say is, if a group is not technophilic, if they do not engage with advanced technology, they are not really relevant to the long-term future of our species, so long as at least a few technophilic groups do make it through this crucible.
I see what you're saying. I've also seen you say that smartphones are sterilizing meme packages, which I
Yes.
love. And I'm wondering if you're like the first person to ever say that sentence. But I like to think about mimetic castration, and I've heard you say cultural castration. I think that's really interesting. And I think of mimetic castration as like the TikTok reel you cannot look away
Yeah.
from, the AirPods you can't take out because you don't even want to. It's amusing ourselves into failing to procreate. And the challenge is not just the memes telling you not to procreate, it's the memes distracting you from the natural inclination to procreate. So basically, it's the porn you just can't resist.
I think it's even more than that. But remember when we were talking about the groups that are able to maintain high fertility rates in the face of all this? The thing that we were saying was most common across all of them is hope for the future. And so many of these cultural mimetic packages, it's not just that you're glued to your screen. It's that many of these cultural groups, status is gained within them through doomerism. Like if you're not a doomer, you're seen as being like naive or something like that. And it's their way of sort of, I don't know, looking mature or something. But yeah, so they genuinely believe in very, very bleak futures. And these beliefs spread very, very well. One of the reasons they might spread well is so we talk about this concept within online governance we call tyranny of the unemployed, which is to say any government structure that gives equal voice to all individuals who are participating will give an unequal voice to people without other demands on their time. I.e., if a person has a job, they're going to have less time to be on forums. If a person has friends, they're going to have less time to be on forums. If a person has a girlfriend or kids, they're going to have less time to be on forums. And this is why a Reddit mod is a Reddit mod, right? Like this is why we have, because that's the profile of a person who has that much time. This is how the power users of these sites are this type of power user. What it means is that the type of culture that's going around within these sites and that is disproportionately elevated is going to appeal to people in these incredibly depressing life positions. But what this means is if you're engaging with them casually, but you're successful in other areas, you will get this perception that the world is just this horribly depressing place with a horribly depressing future because there is a sort of rigged reason for those views to disproportionately outcompete other views.
That is so insightful. Thank you for saying that. That really does shine a lot of light on why there's kind of this inherent pessimism on a lot of the online activity that I wind up encountering tangentially or directly. Yeah. And I don't like it because I'm inherently optimistic, but the more time I spend paying attention to things online, the more I'm like pulled toward this pessimism, this doomerism, as you called it.